What up, Mullen? It's unrated. While watching
Charles Spearman was studying students' grades in different subjects, and he wondered how their performance in one subject, like English, would relate to their performance in another, like math. One option would be that the better a student did in math, the worse they would do in English, maybe because they spent more time on their math work and so had less time to devote to English. So performance in different subjects would be negatively correlated. Another option was that performance in one subject would be completely unrelated to performance in another. After all, different subjects require different skill sets, so maybe marks would be totally uncorrelated.
What about interest? What about interest? Maybe you're just more interested, so whenever they speak words, it gets to your head, otherwise it doesn't.
The third option was that the better a student did in math, the better they would do in English. In other words, their marks would be positively correlated. A correlation coefficient can vary anywhere from -1 to +1. A correlation coefficient of -1 indicates a perfect negative correlation, meaning an increase in one variable corresponds to a precise, predictable decrease in the other variable. Similarly, a correlation of +1 indicates a perfect
React harder
positive
to
correlation.
basic math, like.
A correlation of 0 indicates no relationship between the two variables.
Ooh, a 0 is like that?
Any value between 0 and 1 indicates a positive correlation, but the data has some random spread. The square of the correlation coefficient tells you the amount of variation in one variable that can be explained by variation in the other variable.
Outliers in a cloud of dots.
For example, if the correlation coefficient is 0.5, then 25% of the variation in one variable can be explained by the other. When Spearman analyzed his data, he found a clear positive correlation. Students who did better in math also tended to do better in English, and the correlation coefficient was 0.64. But math and English weren't the only subjects the students studied. They also took classics and French, and when Spearman looked at the correlations between all of these subjects, he found the same pattern. Students who did well in one subject tended to do well in them all. So how do you explain this observation? Well, Spearman proposed that each person has some level of general intelligence, what he called the G factor. This construct was meant to capture how quickly students could learn new material, recognize patterns, and think critically, regardless of the subject matter, which explains why students' scores across subjects are correlated. Those with high G score well on all subjects, and those with low G score poorly on all subjects.
Right.
Spearman published his conclusions in a paper titled General Intelligence Objectively Determined and Measured. But the correlations weren't perfect. So on top of the G factor, Spearman proposed subject-specific factors, or S factors. A student's performance in math, for example, would depend on their general intelligence plus their subject-specific factor for math. Subject-specific factors could increase or decrease performance on that particular subject.
That's pretty interesting, actually.
Spearman believed that
I cannot react. People, okay, last pause of this kind, okay? Let me explain, okay? All the Twitter handles, okay? Get off my dick is last time I ever heard of this in this manner. In this manner. Okay. Some things you just don't understand aren't reactable. You don't know why? Because it's informative and I'm watching everybody else. It's like I'm with friends and we're watching a documentary about animals.
Spike planted.
Like, I'm learning something and I can't go like, oh my god, the S factor? Oh my goodness, wait a minute. Chat, that is a letter of the alphabet. Because you look at G and S,
one enemy remaining.
They're both on the alphabet. We're having some sort of pattern here, guys. Let's play this video.
specific factors.
That's a graph. You learn that in school, 7th grade math much. Got it. Like, you can't react to that shit. Like,
general intelligence was fixed. So he wanted to find a way to reliably measure general intelligence. At around the same time in France, Alfred Binet was tasked with figuring out which kids needed more help in school. Together with Theodore Simon, he developed the Binet-Simon test. Students were asked to name what's missing in the drawing, define abstract terms, and repeat back sentences. And there was also this question asking which face is prettiest. There were 30 tasks in all. Their performance was benchmarked against other students of different ages in order to assign them a mental age. For example, if a student performed about as well as the average 8-year-old, their mental age would be 8.
Chat, it is my understanding, chat, that early child development is extremely important because I guess I studied a little bit of this. Okay?
Spike down A.
Or whatever, whatever we call it. Okay? And early child development, such as giving your child toys that are educational, little blocks, little stuff, right? Anything at all, right? Will have a severe impact on how they're going to develop to that point. From the early stage to that is crazy. It's like, it is not negligible, dude. Little Lego blocks, little whatever. As a child, I had all that shit, dude, and I was a failure and a dropout. So what I'm saying now is dog shit.
This mental age was then divided by their actual age and multiplied by 100 to arrive at a so-called intelligence quotient.
Fuck
was born. So the Binet-Simon test was the world's first IQ test. It was translated by Goddard into English and brought to the US.
Uh-oh.
At Stanford, Lewis Terman standardized it using a large American sample. And with some modifications, it became the Stanford Binet test. And for decades, it was the most widely used test in the United States. But this was just the start. Many other IQ tests were developed. They all had the same goal of measuring the G factor. The way they did this was by assessing many different mental abilities, including memory, verbal, spatial, and numerical skills. Each one of these areas might have a subject-specific shift, but by averaging them all together, the idea was the subject-specific effects would cancel out, leaving a...
Chat, I want you to think of the implications of how dangerous this could be, right? We don't even know what intelligence is at all, right? We don't know how to quantify it whatsoever. And all these tests, they are literally useless, right? On paper. Imagine if you were to do this to kids and quantify them, like who should you pretty much give up on? Because they're not smart enough, or they're not whatever, right? Because you don't understand what intelligence is, and you're giving up on prodigies in other realm or other capacities, and you don't even know you're doing it, right? Imagine these things could have been or were dangerous.
A decent approximation of G. Of course, there would always be some error, but that's why psychologists designed IQ tests with upwards of 7 to 10 sections with distinct tasks to try to minimize subject-specific distortions. All the different IQ tests differed in the number of questions and their difficulty. So to standardize the scoring system, each test was given to a large sample of the population. Raw scores were normalized, usually so the mean was 100 and the standard deviation was 15. And that's how it's still done to this day.
Smart.
This is known as IQ, and it's meant to be a measure of an individual's G factor in comparison to the rest of the population. The way it's scaled, 68% of people have an IQ between 85 and 115. Only around 2% score over 130 or under 70.
Me.
Shadows
11
traveling.
lions, 4 cats, and 7 crows have a total of...
Shadows traveling.
Boy. As I was studying for my IQ test, I practiced all the different types of questions that appear on modern tests. One section will almost certainly be on vocabulary.
Chat, this is approach chat to somebody that's anti-content. Guys, I love this guy, but I feel like the whole point is to kind of cook yourself for content, dude. Just go into shit, go straight to it, dude. That's the...
They give you one word, like sanguine, and you have to pick which of the multiple choice options is most similar in meaning. Is it gloomy, asinine, recalcitrant, optimistic, or reflective?
That would be... That would be, gloomy.
Also ask you to pick a word with the opposite meaning. So what is the opposite of perspicacious? Is it canny, obsequious, dull, fanciful, or sagacious?
Get out of my way!
Another section tests your ability to spot patterns with numbers.
Well, I'm French,
so pick the number that best completes the pattern. 3, 5,
plus
8,
2, plus 3, plus 4,
12,
plus 5, and that was 17.
What comes next? Originally, I was looking for complicated patterns, but as I familiarized myself with the online tests, I discovered The patterns were usually pretty simple. A good technique is to find the difference between adjacent terms. So in this case, the first two terms are separated by
Spike
2,
down A.
the next by 3, and then 4. So the logical next term should be 5 more than 12, so 17. The answer is C. Sometimes the numbers grow rapidly, like in the sequence 3, 15, 90,
Times
80.
times.
What comes next? In cases like this, I look at the ratio of one number to the one before it.
Times 5.
In this case, the
times
second
4,
number
times
is
3,
5
times
times
2,
the
1 through
first.
16.
The next number is 4 times bigger, and the next one is 3 times larger. So the answer should be 2 times the fourth term, which is
One enemy remaining.
answer B. One of the best-known types of IQ test questions are Raven's progressive matrices.
Oh, yeah,
These
classic.
involve a 3x3 grid with
God.
These are
symbols
hard
in
as
each
fuck,
of the cells. And you have to select the
Last
9th cell,
player
which
standing.
follows the
Chat, if you did IQ test, chat, the late game version of this is fucking insane. It is fucking busted. You can't do it. I can't do it. Nobody. It's
Pattern.
insane.
Are you
I
fucking-
found that the bulk of these puzzles obey one of only a few different logical rules. One is translational motion, so the symbols move from one cell to the next in a predictable fashion. The second is rotational motion. One or several objects rotate from one cell to the next. The third is missing symbols, where in each row or column, each symbol
Classic.
appears once. So to figure
Classic
out
video.
which
This is a
symbols
good video.
appear in the final cell, you just have to spot which ones are missing. And the fourth is addition, where the first cell plus the second cell equals the third cell. In this case, lines that overlap
Yep,
cancel
I know
out,
that, I know
but
that.
a line plus nothing equals a line. In most modern IQ tests, all the questions are completed under time pressure. You may have only around 10 to 30 seconds per question. Okay, this morning I'm taking an official IQ test, and I gotta say that I'm pretty nervous. I always want to do well on tests, you know, it's something I pride myself
planted.
on, but at the same time, you know, who
Last
knows
player
how it's gonna
standing.
go. I'm not allowed to take you in there because obviously people don't want the questions getting out, and they don't even want video of what it looks like, and they're very strict about these things.
We have to go there.
I'm gonna go in, do the test, I'll come out, and I'll let you know how it went. Wish me luck. What's remarkable about IQ tests is that an hour or two of questions on vocabulary,
Boy, this bro studied for an IQ test, bro. That's like studying for a taste test or some shit. I feel like. I don't know,
numbers, and arbitrary shapes can predict a surprising amount about your life. For one thing, the higher your IQ, the larger your brain is likely to be. A large meta-analysis from 2005 estimated a correlation of 0.33 between IQ and brain size. So high IQ is literally big brain. IQ is also predictive of school success.
This is why Hassan is so fucking dumb. Oh my god.
Shadows traveling.
This is what. Oh my god.
Spike down.
2007, Scottish psychiatrist Ian Deary measured the IQs of 13,000 11-year-olds. And 5 years later, when these
just
students
joking.
completed national school examinations, Deary compared their exam marks to their IQs.
Their performance on an IQ test when they were 11
Spike
correlated
planted.
with their performance 5 years later on the GCSE. That's
One
an
enemy
extremely
remaining.
high
Correlation.
correlation.
Yeah.
It means about 2/3 of the variation in national school examination scores could be predicted by IQ tests in 5 years prior. Now, the correlation coefficient of this study is at the high end of the 0.2 to 0.8 range found in similar studies, but research supports the claim that IQ is a good predictor of school success. It also predicts how much schooling a person will complete. Maybe this shouldn't be so surprising, since some school tests are essentially IQ tests. It's been argued that tests like the SAT, ACT, and the GRE are basically IQ tests. They correlate with standard IQ tests at around 0.8.
Chat, this is such a because in my opinion, chat, guys, it sucks to treat people as a statistic.
Pause
right?
there.
Be like, well, you're more likely than not to succeed on this, so fuck it, let's not do that. Like, it would really suck to do a test and be like, well,
Get out of my
the
way.
math say that you're probably not gonna make it really far, or whatever, and that really sucks. Like, that's trash.
Now, on my SATs, I got a score of 1330, which corresponds to an IQ of around 130. So it'll be interesting to see if my official IQ score matches that, or if I was able to increase my score by familiarizing myself with IQ-style questions. But IQ also has predictive power outside of school. One of the most robust
Spike
findings
planted.
is that IQ can predict job success.
Particularly in technical or
Don't be
high
dumb.
complexity.
Don't be dumb. Dude, if you're being dumb or not,
Fuck you.
back spawn points. What if people said it?
Ah,
When you
I
were
just
born
want
in
you
this
so
position
bad.
in the city, where people just not wanting to go to college, according to the
One
stats,
enemy
nobody
remaining.
should be allowed to go to college that are born in this particular part of town. It's not you. What a stupid fucking thing to say. Hell
Jobs.
no.
How do you measure occupational success?
You ask people's bosses to rate
It's the
them.
same behavior.
You ask what people's income is. You measure productivity in ways that economists use about, the output generated.
The correlations typically range from 0.2 to 0.6,
want their
and the
life
effect is
jobs.
most notable for more complex jobs, which makes sense. The highest effect is for military training. In fact, the US military will not accept anyone with an IQ under 80. They also limit to 20% the number of recruits with IQs between 81 and 92. During the Vietnam War, in order to increase the pool of applicants, they relaxed this last requirement. But what they found was that those below the threshold were 1.5 to 3 times as likely to
Spike
fail
down
recruit
A.
training. And they required between 3 to 9 times as much remedial training. Taken together, this added so much strain that the military ran more efficiently without the extra recruits. In total, 5,478 people recruited
One
into the
enemy
military
remaining.
died.
Fuck
What
you.
the trick is
Oh
that
my
they-
gosh.
Instead they just put them on the front line, where they're like more likely to like,
Get
have
them.
a short lifespan. Like, oh yeah, you're hired, whatever, and then they make sure that they're like really front line soldiers,
Anyone
so
have
that
any
they're more likely
speeds?
to
I may have
like,
down
die.
my fingers.
A fatality rate 3 times higher than ordinary recruits. So the military reinstated their requirements, and today anyone with an IQ less than 80, that is about 30 million Americans, would be ineligible to join the military.
I'm just saying, that seems like something.
Even outside the military, IQ seems to play a role in how long you live. In a Scottish study, scientists uncovered IQ tests from kids when they were 11 years old. Now, 65 years later, they checked to see who from the sample was still alive at age 76. And they found that on average, for every 15-point increase on the IQ test, you would be 27% more likely to still be alive at age 76. A large meta-analysis confirms that people with higher IQs have a lower risk of dying during the time frame investigated in each study. The last major thing that IQ seems
I'm
to
already
predict
dead.
is income. This study shows a clear tendency for income to increase with IQ, and it found a
Spike
correlation
down A.
coefficient of 0.3. But the variance is huge. In fact, the top 3
On TikTok,
Fuck
social media,
you.
Twitch, YouTube, and then this shit went fucking flippo mode.
Spike planted.
On its
earners
head.
in this study all had IQs below
just kidding, I'm just
100. A large meta-analysis of 31 studies found the correlation between IQ and income to be 0.21.
Satchel out.
That is significant but small. It means that only
Last player
24% of variance in income is explained by IQ. Maybe one of the reasons why we don't see as high a correlation for income is just because economically intelligence is not necessarily that highly rewarded, and that maybe there are jobs, like
Incorrect.
just doing a real estate type.
Incorrect.
It seems
Guys,
these
you guys say
strangers
true?
won't be dead.
That is inherently incorrect because intelligence is inherently unquantifiable, and the ways you can be smart in and the ways you can do and use your intellect to make income is intelligence on its own. The core concept of making money or succeeding has a lot of things that are untangibles that'll make you get that income, and that is smart on its own. It's just not in a way that it's why these tests are useless.
Scheme, like maybe that doesn't require a huge amount of intelligence. Simultaneously, you have all these very highly intelligent people who need to become called.
If you're so smart, okay, you have such a high IQ, and you're so intelligent, and you have so many degrees, whatever, why are you broke? Gotcha. Okay. Intelligence has immobile facets that you're failing to understand and put in the equation.
College professors, but that doesn't necessarily pay very
Well,
well.
bro, I'm not even roasting. I'm just telling you.
A lot of people who have very
you're-
high intelligence scores
you're-
don't have the same interest in
Goals make money.
accumulating money.
The relationship with net worth is even.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. Last pause. I didn't mean to be hurtful about this chat. My bad. That was insensitive. What I meant is that if your whole goal is to make money, and you deem yourself intelligent, and that's your only goal to make money, and you're not achieving that, maybe you're not that smart. If because you're driven in a field that doesn't have a lot of money to it, and you're very intelligent, and you don't make a lot of money, that's fair enough. That happens everywhere. That happens almost in all the fields, especially in science research, where there's not a lot of funding. People that are very smart, that have like a lot of big PhDs with low funding. These are very smart people. Don't make a lot of money, right?
30 seconds
because they're not
left.
driven on making money. But in the end, if you're trying to make money and you're intelligent, and you're not making money, well, you're probably dumb.
Weaker. It hardly seems to correlate with IQ, even though people with higher IQs are supposedly more intelligent and on average they make more money each year. But this apparently doesn't translate
Spike
into
planted.
saving or accumulating more wealth overall. But if IQ correlates with school achievement, job performance, income, and longevity, why don't we hear more about it? Why aren't more people tested? I think it's because IQ has a dark history.
What the fuck?
Last player
When
standing.
Henry Goddard brought Benet's test to America,
Bro, I thought I
its
blinded
use and
him.
interpretation shifted
I knew
dramatically.
it.
I thought I blinded him!
Benet believed intelligence could be improved through education. He designed his tests so that struggling students could be given more help to catch up. But in the US, the modified test was given to adults to rank them by intelligence.
That's not right.
And researchers like Spearman believed that G was unchangeable, that whatever general intelligence you were born with, you would have for the rest of your life. And many thought G was inherited, passed down from parents to children.
Okay, this is like almost like worse than eugenics in my opinion.
These days we would say it has a genetic basis. There is some evidence to support these assumptions. IQ appears fairly consistent over one's lifetime.
So they had
No,
tests
it's
done when
eugenics,
people
but
were
worse. It's
11
on-
years old. They found
it's
all
on
those
crack.
tests in a filing cabinet and followed those people up and gave them the same test when they were 90 years, much, much later.
Their scores
We tend to
correlated at around 0.5 to 0.6. There's also evidence for a genetic basis to IQ.
Chat, yes, genetic, but also
Round in the
there's
half.
also environment relation to
You need a
it.
drop.
Like where you were born, income of your parents.
get a drop?
There's biological things, right? But as you're developing as a child, your environment impacts you severely on whether or not you're gonna score high. Therefore, this is eugenics plus other things. So it's like eugenics on crack.
You find, for instance, that if you get two identical twins and give them an IQ test, they have a very strong correlation. It's actually about the same as giving the same person the test, a few weeks apart.
Henry Goddard used the claims that intelligence was inherited and unchangeable to put IQ at the center of the American eugenics movement.
On my way.
Eugenicists wanted to prevent those with undesirable traits from having
On my way.
kids. In many states, laws were passed to enable forced sterilization of people who failed to meet a certain threshold on an IQ test. The constitutionality of these laws was
Spike
upheld
down
by the
A.
Supreme Court in 1927.
Last player
That we
standing.
now use as insults, moron,
Fuck!
idiot, imbecile,
Yep.
were used as scientific terms.
In his judgment, Justice Oliver
I knew this
Wendell
already.
Holmes wrote, "It is better for all the world if instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for crime, or to let them starve for their imbecility, society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough." In total, over 60,000 people were forcibly sterilized as a result of these laws. In fact, they served as a model for Nazi Germany. Hitler himself claimed to be inspired by American eugenicists.
These have been used for
This is educational content.
things in the past.
At the Nuremberg trials after the war, some Nazis quoted from the American Supreme Court decision. Given
Okay, I have to pause again. This guy's hairline, bro, just give up, man. Listen, I gotta keep it a stack. This guy, brother, it's done. It's done, man. Stop
from the
holding on to that
American
shit.
Supreme Court decision.
He's got a line in the middle.
Given this awful history, I think it's understandable that many people today. On the science of intelligence, there are a number of things those early researchers got wrong. One is that IQ is not entirely determined by genetics.
Can you quantify the effects of the environment?
When you look at twin studies,
Down A.
on average, across the whole lifespan, it's about 50-50. to heritability and environment.
You simply
Oh
can't,
my God.
for ethical reasons,
What's up, bitches? What the fuck is up now? I called
estimate
it.
it
Are
in
you
humans,
schmalled now?
you know, with a reasonable degree of certainty or accuracy. Given my reading of that literature, it's a pretty broad range, probably somewhere between 40% and 70%.
Okay. And since education can improve IQ, it is not completely fixed over a lifetime. Plus, intelligence might not be a single construct as initially imagined. These days, scientists recognize two forms of intelligence, fluid and crystallized. Fluid intelligence is your ability to learn, process information, and solve novel problems. Whereas crystallized intelligence involves the knowledge you've accumulated over your lifetime. Both types of intelligence increase throughout childhood, but fluid intelligence peaks in early adulthood and then declines, whereas crystallized intelligence remains more stable. But IQ has been further misused to promote the idea of racial differences in intelligence. There is, for example, an observed gap between the average IQ of black and white Americans. Articles have also been published on the IQs of different nations around the world.
Yeah,
Many of these nations have reported to have average IQs below 70. That's the cutoff for intellectual disability. How could this be? The conclusion that some draw is that there are genetic differences between races or nations in intelligence. But I think that's a gross misrepresentation of the data.
That's right.
The problem, I'd argue, is that IQ tests don't necessarily measure what you think they're measuring. And the proof is that there's a representative sample of white Americans whose average IQ is 70. Who are these people? Just ordinary Americans who lived around 100 years ago. Researcher James Flynn studied the average results of IQ tests over the past century.
Shut the fuck up,
And
chat.
every
I'm
so
not-
often, the tests get updated and renormalized.
Guys, look. Okay, that's it.
To keep their average at 100. Now, what Flynn noticed was that each time they got renormalized, the scores had to be shifted down a bit more, by about 2 or 3 IQ points per decade. And if they didn't do this, what we would see is that the average IQ of the whole population was increasing at a steady rate for the last 100 years, adding up to around a 30-point increase. This is known as the Flynn effect.
We're our immediate ancestors
Last player
on
standing.
the verge of mental retardation. Because 70 is normally the score for mental retardation. Or are we on the verge of all being gifted? Because 130 is the cutting line for giftedness.
Now, the genetics of the population haven't really changed over 100 years. So what caused the increase?
Chat, power creeping.
Well, there is some debate about the true causes, but one of them is probably improving childhood nutrition
That's
and health.
right.
You know,
That's right.
height also increased across that time period, right? People got taller and taller and taller.
Another cause is better education.
There's lots of evidence that school makes you more intelligent.
You become better at problem solving if you have more knowledge, because
Chat.
it's
Hold
easier
up.
for you
Last
to...
pause, chat. The way this is presented to me, chat. The way the video's presented to me. This my conclusion with the video. It's pretty much what I thought. This is what it. Conclusion from the video. I'm not making this conclusion. It is that you can't make this comparison with like a races or whatever, and it's stupid because if you back up and you segregate or like fuck up an entire area of people or like race, well, of course they have less tools that they can use to develop that, and then they're hindered in that, so they're like living in the past almost.
make associations if you have more things to make the associations with.
A third proposed cause is a shift in the types of work that most people do. From
One enemy
mostly manual
remaining.
labor 100 years ago to much more abstract thinking these days. And that shift may have made us better at answering the types of
Player
questions
standing.
on IQ tests.
They were not good enough.
The point is that IQ tests appear to objectively measure intelligence,
I'm not an idiot. I'm
but
a
they
moron.
don't. Even in the same country, separated only
That's
by
good.
time, cultural changes can affect the average scores on IQ tests.
Can I get a drop?
So why shouldn't we expect cultural differences between groups at the same time to have the same effect? Some tests go so far as to label themselves culture fair, meaning the questions should be equally valid for all cultures. But the truth is, it's impossible to construct such a test.
Does that work?
Get out of my way!
Okay.
Cover going out.
No, I mean, that's just a title, right? That's just a marketing term. I don't think there is such a thing as a completely culture-free or culture-fair.
Culture fair tests assess visual relations, geometric shapes, and patterns, ignoring the fact that cultures differ in, for example, whether they have words for shapes or spatial relations. These differences influence how people think about and use categories. It's also debatable whether cultures without printed materials even perceive them in the same way that we do. What culture fair tests don't assess is ethnobotanical knowledge, or training dogs to hunt, or surviving alone in the rainforest. Arguably, these forms of intelligence are more important for survival than knowing, say, the next number in the sequence. But since they are less common in our culture and we don't have ways of measuring them, we see IQ puzzles as the definitive way to quantify intelligence.
That makes a lot of sense.
And the people who make these tests agree. There are stringent requirements before a test validated for one population can be used with a very different population. Even in the limited forms of intelligence that IQ attempts to assess, there are factors other than G that affect the final IQ.
So as culture becomes more kind of like all
One enemy remaining.
I'm not gonna say that.
Clutch.
Things should equalize is what I'm trying to say.
Like motivation. How much someone is incentivized to complete the test can have a marked impact on their score. Many studies have tried paying subjects to complete an IQ test.
What?
In some studies, they're offered a little, say around $1. Other studies offer between $1 and $10, and the real high rollers offer more than $10. A large meta-analysis showed that motivating people in this way increased IQ. And the larger the dollar amount, the greater the average increase. At the high end, IQ increased by up to 20 points. The effect is largest for those with below average IQs. So in addition to G, IQ tests also measure motivation. But it doesn't stop there. Training and coaching for an IQ test can boost scores by up to 8 points.
Yeah.
I just completed the test in some random no really talk after that. It seemed pretty fair. There were lots of different sections. The math section in particular, killed. Those questions were easy. I would say, having done the test, I feel like I should be trained. Like, you should be able to train someone to do that well.
Chat, I know he's mauled about the shapes and shit like that late game. They're so hard.
Strategy is
He's
also
so mauled.
Some people are just better at keeping the test than others.
One enemy
I think the
remaining.
hardest thing about the test was the time limits. Looking for the patterns in a series of shapes. And it just normally takes me a little while, so I feel like I didn't finish those.
I just fucking called and I didn't watch the video!
You have to know when to skip questions, how to eliminate clearly wrong answers, and when to guess. Anxiety also plays a role. Apparently, a small amount of anxiety is good, but past a certain point, it negatively impacts performance.
Oh my god, oh my god.
I guess
Chat,
the overall
these
review
are things
is...
I kill you guys every day, man!
I think I did okay. And I think the training actually really helped. That's my prediction. Let us fast forward to the future and see how I actually did.
I need this.
I actually got my results from the author of the IQ test I took.
There are three areas, three specific areas.
For the math one, for the numbers one, I think that's where I felt really comfortable when I, got there before the time was done and I could go back and look at a few things.
Yes. You blew the roof off the quantitative. On the quantitative, it was 143. Whereas on the crystallized intelligence index, it was 132. The fluid intelligence index was 118, which still is a higher score than 88.5%.
It's not bad, but it's interesting that one is significantly lower, I guess.
And that's not an unusual difference. Around that concept of G, people have strengths and weaknesses. If we were to look at the best estimate of G on this set of tests, and it'd be different if you took a different test, it was at 134, which is higher than 98.8% of the population.
Cover going out.
Hopefully you're not disappointed with any of that.
No, I wanted to do well.
Not bad.
I feel like my motivation was high, possibly higher than the average person. So, what is IQ good for?
Like clinical practice.
One enemy
Social
remaining.
Science. and about 90% of my cases are death penalty. One of the most common issues is what's referred to the Atkins defense, after the name of the U.S. Supreme Court case that eliminated the death penalty for people with intellectual disability.
Can't the criminal just throw the IQ test? Can't they just intentionally answer every question wrong?
We know that. I mean, we include, just like in the test that you took, there are embedded measures of invalidity. It's detected.
Never
using
back
very
down, never
specific
what?
We're better than 95% accurate in detecting people who are attempting to take poor performance.
Oh, wow.
One thing that we might be interested in doing is to boost people's cognitive ability early in life so that it takes them, even if they go into cognitive decline, it takes them longer to reach the point where they'll have functional, actual everyday problems where they lose independence, whether it comes to dealing with their money or whether it comes to dealing with reading labels, whatever it is that people struggle with when they get into kind of later stages of cognitive decline. If we could discover a way to lastingly boost people's intelligence, that would be massively helpful.
Maybe its best use is in identifying individuals with strong intellectual abilities who haven't otherwise been able to demonstrate them.
Teachers would recommend that a kid gets put in the gifted and talented program because generally they've observed them doing well in the classroom. But if you replace that with a standardized test, an IQ test, you find higher proportion of poorer kids and kids from minority ethnic backgrounds in the gifted and talented program when you use an IQ test. And the reason is that you're using an objective measure. You're not just relying on some teacher's opinion. Getting into a good school is about who you knew, or who your parents were, or how much money your parents had. Not so much what you do. The idea that you can try to develop an objective-ish measure that would try and iron out all those social biases was clearly a well-meaning idea.
IQ is something that not only psychology but the general public has a love-hate relationship with.
Tell me about that.
Psychologists hate to talk about intelligence and people's intelligence test scores and that kind of stuff. And I've had parents, when I've included intelligence as part of a neuropsychological evaluation of my kid, they'll say, "Well, yeah, I'd like to know his IQ, but we don't really care about that." What was it?
And then I also think you have the debate about IQ.
I'm learning it.
You have the extreme of people who say, this is the most important thing ever. People's IQ is amazingly important.
Spike down A.
And we can classify them into particular schools or particular ways of education or whatever. That's the one extreme. I think that's totally unproductive. But there's another extreme. The other extreme is the kind of blank slate view, which is that these tests are completely useless. They don't tell us anything. That they're only a tool of racism and prejudice and so on. I think that's wrong as well. And there's just this massive firestorm on both sides happening around them. And the people in the middle just get forgotten. The people have more on these sort of topics. So, I'd recommend that people
The big mistake is thinking that IQ in some way determines someone's worth.
Joke's over!
What's much more important, in my opinion, is
because once you know somebody's IQ, what's the next move? What do you do? What use do you have? How are you going to treat them? Right? What then?
how you interact with and help the people around you. Which is why I think Stephen Hawking said people who brag about their IQ are losers.
Fuck! That's
While
right.
IQ tells us something,
losers.
it doesn't tell us how our lives will turn out. We have the ability to dramatically improve our outcomes by building knowledge and analytical skills. And if you're looking for a free and easy way to do that, then you should check out this video sponsor, brilliant.org. With Brilliant, you can master key concepts of everything from...
Things are dead.
Spike down, C.
Great. Great. Hey. Great. I just fucking... Ah! Ah! You fucking kidding me? Oh my god, I want out.
At me. I know that I am by your side.
Enemy spotted A.
And here.
Shadows traveling. Watch them.
Spike down A. Last player
Fuck
standing.
you. Oh my god.
Think they'll see before they die. Lucky them.
We go!
What?
Still in sight.
Still in sight.
Our spike's down. Spike down. C. Still in sight. Last player standing.
The fuck? That shit was ah. Oh well. Leave it there. Let's take- pause. Next. Later. Goodbye. Bye.